Sponsored by Rabbi Shlomi and Mirala Greenwald. This is a Sikha from Likkutei Sichos, Chelik Yud Beis, Parsha Shmini, Sikha Beis. And the topic of the Sikha is that this week's Parsha, Parsha Shmini, often falls out on the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, when we read Parsha Chodesh. And there are three parts in the Sikha. The Rebbe will, number one, ask what's the connection between Rosh Chodesh Nisan and Parsha Shmini. Number two, ask what's the connection between the greatness of Parsha Chodesh over Parsha's Parah and the greatness of Shmini Lamiluyim over the previous Shivas Miluyim. Since we read Parsha Chodesh on Parsha Shmini when we learn about Shmini Lamiluyim, and we read Parshas Parah on Parshas Tzav when we learn about the Shivas Miluyim. And number three, the structure of the Sikha is that the Rebbe will first explain the difference between Shmini Lamiluyim and Shivas Miluyim. Then he will explain the greatness of Parshas Chodesh over Parshas Parah, and then show their connection. Parsha Shmini is read in many years on the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and this Shabbos has a clear connection to Rosh Chodesh Nisan because on it we read Parshas Chodesh Zalachem, since it's the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and Parshas Chodesh Zalachem talks about Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so there is a clear connection between Parsha Shmini and Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And according to what's known, it's a well-known teaching of the Shalah, that all the Moedim are connected to the Parshias that they fall out in, meaning that if a certain Yom Tov falls out on a certain week, there's a connection between that Yom Tov and the Parsha that we read that week. So according to this well-known teaching of the Shalah, so it's understood that there's a connection between Rosh Chodesh Nisan and Parsha Shmini. And so that's the question, so to speak, of the Sikha. What is the connection between Rosh Chodesh Nisan and Parsha Shmini? Now, the simple connection between Rosh Chodesh Nisan and Parshas Chodesh to Parsha Shmini is that the Yom HaShmini was on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So we have a clear connection. The connection between Parsha Shmini and Rosh Chodesh Nisan is that Parsha Shmini talks about the Shmini Lameloyim that occurred on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. However, Rosh Chodesh Nisan isn't mentioned in the Parsha, and the only thing that's mentioned is that it was Vayihi Bayem HaShmini, that it was the Shmini Lameloyim. And so therefore it makes sense that the main connection between Parsha Shmini and Rosh Chodesh Nisan is regarding the Shmini Lamiluyim, since that's what the Parsha talks about. And we said that the Parsha, which talks about Shmini Lamiluyim, is connected to Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So meaning, what we're saying over here is that the advantage of Shmini Lamiluyim over the previous Shivas Miluyim is similar to the advantage of Rosh Chodesh Nisan over other days that seem to be similar to it. So that's crystallizing over here the task of the Sikha, and that is that we're going to explain, when we say the connection between Parsha Shmini and Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we're going to explain what's the connection between Shmini Lamiluyim that is greater than the Shivas Miluyim to Rosh Chodesh Nisan that's greater than other days that are similar to it. Now, another thing we need to explain here is that in a year like this, where Parshas Chodesh is read on Parsha Shmini, so we read Parshas Parah on the previous week, on Parshas Tzav, that speaks of the Shivas Miluyim. And so since Parshas Parah comes as an introduction to Parshas Chodesh, like the Gemara in the Yerushalmi says, why Parshas Parah is read before Parshas Chodesh, and so too the Shivas Miluyim were an introduction to the Shmini Lamiluyim. So we have both Parshas Parah, which is read in Parshas Tzav, being an introduction to Parshas Chodesh, and also the Shivas Miluyim, which is read in Parshas Tzav, is an introduction to the Shmini Miluyim. So it makes sense that the advantage and the greatness of Parshas Chodesh over Parshas Parah is similar to the greatness of Shmini Miluyim over the previous Shivas Miluyim. So this will be understood by first explaining what Razal said in Gemara, that Oise Yoyim Notol Asara Ataris. That day, Shmini Lamiluyim took for itself 10 crowns. And the Gemara over there counts what are these 10 things. And Taisvis writes, this that the Gemara doesn't consider as one of the 10 things or as an 11th thing, that it's the first day of the building of the Mishkan. So he gives two answers. Either Mishum Damrinim b'Medrash Shekol Zayin Yimei HaMiluyim, because we say in the Medrash that all 7 days of the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim, Moshe would build the Mishkan and take it apart, and so Shemini LaMiluyim is not the first day of the building of the Mishkan. And the second answer is Inami, or also Mishum Da'alei Da'akamas HaMishkan Kai, because it's on the building of the Mishkan, that the Gemara is talking about. It's talking about the day of the building of the Mishkan took for itself 10 ataras. But what's most fundamental and important and prominent about the day that makes it a day that we're talking about is that it's the first day of the building of the Mishkan. And this is what the Gemara is saying. That day of the building of the Mishkan, Natal Asara Ataras Acheres. It took for itself 10 other crowns. And the question is that these two answers of Tosfos are opposites. The first answer is essentially saying that being Rishon La'akamas HaMishkan is less than the other Asara Ataras, to the extent that it's not counted as one of them. It's not a special thing that it was the first day of the building of the Mishkan, since it wasn't, but rather the Mishkan was built during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim. It was built every single day during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim. And so the fact that it was built in a more significant way is not important enough to be counted as one of the 10 ataras. Whereas according to the second answer, being Rishon La'akamas HaMishkan is the main greatness of that day. And it's that day that is the first of the building of the Mishkan in a permanent way that Natal Asara Ataras. And so these two answers are opposite of one another. So we have to understand what is the basis for these totally opposite approaches. So this will be understood by first answering the following question. And the question is, why did Moshe build a Mishkan during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim if Hashem commanded him, B'yayim HaChodesh HaRishon, Be'echad LaChodesh, on the first of the month, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which was the Shemini LaMiluyim, Takim is Mishkan Oil Moed, then you should build the Mishkan. So why did Moshe build it prior to this during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim? And there are two answers to this question. The Ramban explains that the reason Moshe built a Mishkan during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim is because Hashem commanded him at first. Hashem told him, "V'kimoises haMishkan ki mishpatei asher reisa bahar." You should build a Mishkan like it's supposed to be built, the way I showed you by the mountain. Meaning that Moshe has to build a Mishkan immediately after completing the Melachas HaMishkan, which would be at the start of the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim. And it's just that after Hashem told him, that he should build it on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And this command is that he should build it in a permanent way. So Moshe understood that during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim, he would have to build it in a way that it's not permanent. And so he would build it and take it apart each day. So according to the Ramban, it comes out that there were two separate commands. One command was that he should build it during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim in a non-permanent way, and another command was that he should build it on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, on the Shemini LaMiluyim, in a permanent way. And so that's why Moshe Rabbeinu built it during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim. However, that's the opinion of the Ramban. There's another opinion. Because, however, the simple meaning of B'yayim HaChodesh Rishon Be'echad LaChodesh Takim is Mishkan Oil Moed is not that it should be permanent. The Ramban is learning it that it means permanent, and so from there we learn that the other command means in a non-permanent way. However, the simple meaning of the pasuk is not that it should be done in a permanent way. It's just saying to build it, but rather it's just saying that he should build it, and when he should build it, he should build it on Rosh Chodesh Nisan and not before. And so since Rashi doesn't say it means permanently, so that proves that Rashi holds that it's teaching just that it should be built and when it should be built. And according to this, it comes out that it's the same command as the command of Hakimaisesh Mishkan Kimishpata Sharis Bahar. There weren't two commands over here, and it's just adding the time that Vakimaisesh Mishkan Kimishpata Sharis Bahar should be Be'echad LaChodesh on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And according to the opinion of Rashi, the reason Moshe built a Mishkan during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim, even though there was no command for it, is because he learned it from other commands he was given, that he had to prepare Aaron and his sons. And in those commands, it mentions that the Mishkan was there, and especially since it says that it should be El Pesach Oyel Mayad. It says that all the things that were done, or many of the things that were done during the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim, should be by the Pesach Oyel Mayad, which means that the Mishkan was built. And so he didn't get a clear command for it, but he understood it from the other things that Hashem commanded him, and that's why he built it during the Shivas Yemei Miluyim. And this opinion of Rashi that we're saying he holds in Chumash is also seen in Rashi in the Gemara, when the Gemara says that it was Rishon Lishkan Shechina. And very briefly, Rashi says over there, Shechina Sharsa Sham Ki Dechtiv V'Shachante B'Soicham. Michlal Da'ad Hashta Lo Sharsa. Rashi says that the Shechina rested there, like it says V'Shachante B'Soicham. And so the question is, why was it Rishon Lishkan Shechina? If it was resting there, because it says V'Shachanti B'Soicham, then it should have already been there during the Shivas Yemei Miluyim when he built the Mishkan. And the answer is because during the Shivas Yemei Miluyim, the Mishkan wasn't built as a separate independent entity. It was only built as a detail of the preparation of Aaron and his sons. Since the preparation had to be done El Pesach Oil Moed, so the Mishkan has to be there. But the Mishkan wasn't built as an independent its own entity, as something important and prominent. It was only built as a detail of something else. And so therefore it wasn't really the building of the Mishkan, and that's why there was no V'Shachanti B'Seichem during that time. According to this, we can now come back to our previous question regarding the fact that the two answers of Tosfos are totally opposite of one another. And what's the basis to this? So according to this, that we have this argument between the Ramban and Rashi, so we can say that the two answers in Tosfos differ in the argument between the Ramban and Rashi. The first answer in Tosfos, that the reason the Shmini LaMiluyim is not counted as Rishon LaKamas HaMishkan, because the Mishkan was already built during the Shivas Yemei Miluyim, and so therefore it's not something special to this day. So that fits with the opinion of the Ramban, that also the building of the Mishkan during the Shivas Yemei Miluyim was because of a command from Hashem, and therefore Shmini LaMiluyim isn't special in being Rishon LaKamas HaMishkan. Whereas the second answer in Tosfos, that the fact that it's Rishon LaKamas HaMishkan is the most prominent part of this day, so that fits with the opinion of Rashi, that building the Mishkan during the Shivas Yemei Miluyim was a detail in the chinuch of Aaron and his sons, and therefore only Shmini LaMiluyim is Rishon LaKamas HaMishkan. Since its building during the Shivas Yemei Miluyim was just a detail in the chinuch of Aaron and his sons, and it had nothing to do with building the Mishkan as an independent and separate thing. We can give another answer to this question on Tosfos about the two answers being totally opposite. So we can give another answer to this by first explaining the difference between the building of the Mishkan during the Shivas Yemei Miluyim and the building of the Mishkan on Shmini LaMiluyim. That each one has an advantage over the other. The advantage of the Shmini LaMiluyim is an advantage in eichos and quality, because it was built in a permanent way, which shows that it is of greater quality, and it led to V'Shachanti B'Soicham. Another thing about quality, the advantage of the Shivas Yemei Miluyim is an advantage of kamos, quantity, since they built the Mishkan each day, and actually they built it each day at least once, because there are some opinions that say that they built it even 2 or 3 times each day during the Shivas Yemei Miluyim. And according to this, we can say that the two answers in Tosfos depend on the opinions whether eichos or kamos are better. According to the first answer in Tosfos, that we don't count Shmini LaMiluyim as Rishon LaKamas HaMishkan, as the first time that the Mishkan was built, since it was already built during the Shivas Yemei Miluyim. So it comes out that the first answer is based on saying that the multitude of kamos is greater than what eichos has to offer, and therefore Shmini LaMiluyim isn't Rishon LaKamas HaMishkan. And according to the second answer that says that the most prominent thing of Shmini LaMiluyim is that it was the Rishon LaKamas HaMishkan, and that's the day, the Shmini LaMiluyim, that was Rishon LaKamas HaMishkan, that took 10 crowns. So according to the second answer, the greatness of eichos is greater than the multitude of kamos, of quantity, and it's actually the greatness of Shmini LaMiluyim. That is its greatness, that it has eichos in it. And this fits with Tosfos saying in the first answer, Shekol Zayin Yemei Miluyim Haya Moshe Maimid HaMishkan Umefarkai. Moshe would build and take apart the Mishkan. Why does Tosfos say take it apart? it actually weakens it. He's saying that all 7 days he built the Mishkan and took it apart. He should just say the reason why the 8th day is not counted, because all the days of the Shivas Yamim Miluyim, Moshe built the Mishkan, so he already built it beforehand. It wasn't built for the first time on Shemini Miluyim. Why does Tosfos also add Umafarkai, which seems to weaken the fact that it was built during the 7 days? Because he also took it apart. And the reason is because that emphasizes that during the Shivas Yamim Miluyim, there's actually an advantage. Not only was it also built during the Shivas Yamim Miluyim, but there's actually an advantage to the way it was built in the Shivas Yamim Miluyim, because it was a mafarkai. He took it apart at least every day, and so therefore it comes out that he built it at minimum once a day, which means that he built it more times during the Shivas Yamim Miluyim than on the Shemini Miluyim. Now, according to all the above, we'll understand the connection between the Shivas Yamim Miluyim in Parshas Tzav and the Shemini Miluyim in our Parsha, the Parshas Parah and Parshas HaChodesh. So up to this point, all we spoke about were the Shivas Yamim Miluyim and the Shemini Miluyim. We didn't yet discuss Parshas Parah and Parshas HaChodesh. So now we're going to lead into an explanation of Parshas Parah and Parshas HaChodesh. And once we have an understanding of Parshas Parah and Parshas HaChodesh, that will lead us into our final answer to understand how are they connected to the Shivas Yamim Miluyim and the Shemini Miluyim. So regarding Parshas Parah and Parshas HaChodesh, Parshas HaChodesh, it says in the Yerushalmi that Bedinhu, that really it should have been that Shetaktam HaChodesh LaParah. That Parshas HaChodesh should have been read before Parshas Parah. And the reason is Shebe'echad b'Nisan hukam HaMishkan, because on the first of Nisan the Mishkan was built, Uvesheni Nisan for Parah, and it's on the second of Nisan that the Parah was burnt. V'lama Parah Kedemus, and why is Parshas Parah before Parshas HaChodesh? Shehi Tarasan Shel Kol Yisrael, because it's the purity of all the Yidden. And the simple understanding of this is that since it's the purity of all the Yidden, and Parshas HaChodesh also talks about the Korban Pesach, so therefore you have to have Parshas Parah, which brings the purity, before Parshas HaChodesh, which is the bringing of the Korban Pesach, because a person has to be pure in order to bring the Korban Pesach. However, it's not understood over here, because since Parshas HaChodesh only comes after Parshas Parah, like we first read Parshas Parah, and then Parshas HaChodesh, so how was the Mishkan put up on the first of Nisan, which is connected to Parshas HaChodesh, before the Sreifas HaParah? It should have first had the Sreifas HaParah, because we're saying that first you have to have the Sreifas HaParah, and then the Hukam HaMishkan, because you have to have Taras and Shekol Yisrael before Parshas HaChodesh. So how back then was it in a reversed order, that first they had Hukam HaMishkan, which is Parshas HaChodesh, and then Nisr HaParah, which is Parshas Parah? And even though you're going to say the blood of the parah has to be sprinkled in front of the oil mayid, so you have to wait till the Mishkan is built, but we know that they already built the Mishkan during the Shivas Yamim Miluyim. And even though another answer you could give, that the reason the Chodesh needs the parah is not connected to the building of the Mishkan. What's our question? How could you build the Mishkan without the parah? But there's no connection, really, it would seem, between the building of the Mishkan and the parah, but rather to the Korban Pesach in it. The answer is saying that it's a Taira of the Yidden. The Parah is the Taira of the Yidden, and therefore it has to come before Parshas HaChodesh, that talks about not the building of the Mishkan, that also talks about the Korban Pesach. However, since in the question, when we look in the Yerushalmi, it talks about Hukam HaMishkan, the question doesn't say anything about the Korban Pesach. It says that on the first of Nisan they built the Mishkan, and on the second they burnt the Parah. It doesn't mention anything about the Korban Pesach. So that shows that the Hakamas HaMishkan on the first of Nisan is also connected to Parshas HaChodesh. And so it has to be that the answer answers that. The Yerushalmi doesn't make any mention of the Korban Pesach. It just talks about the building of the Mishkan on the first of Nisan and the Sreifas HaParah on the second. And it's asking if they built it on the first, they built the Mishkan on the first of Nisan and they burnt the Parah on the second of Nisan. So first should be Parshas HaChodesh and then should be Parshas Parah. And the Yerushalmi answers to that question. You know why Parah is first? Because it's Taras and Shel Kol Yisrael, which means that since it's the Taira of Kol Yisrael, therefore the Sreifas HaParah has to be before the building of the Mishkan. Whatever the explanation, and that is, as we'll see. But that's what the Yerushalmi is saying, that the Parshas Parah has to be before the building of the Mishkan. So how was it that originally, when they did it, they first built the Mishkan, and then they had the Sreifas HaParah? So this will be understood by first explaining the difference between Pesach, which is the main part of Parshas HaChodesh, and Parah, which is what Parshas Parah is about, and Avodas Adam. So Pesach, like the first time that Yidden are like a ger, and a ger shenizgaya kukot and sheneladami. Pesach is the time of the birth of Kalal Yisrael. So that is the avodas hatzadikim. And para, so we know that the para, the Torah calls it a chatos, which is a carbon that's brought from Averis. And the para itself is mechaper, it atones on the egel. So that is avodas hatshuva. So we have over here the avodas hatzadikim, which is Parshas HaChodesh, and we have the avodas hatshuva, which is Parshas Para. And this is also the meaning of what the Medrash says, bazeh, by this one, meaning by the carbon Pesach, Nemar, it says, Zeis Chukas HaPesach, Uvazem, by this one, meaning the Paraduma, Nemar, it says, Zeis Chukas HaTera. It says, Zeis Chukas HaTera, and the word Chukah is used by both. V'yate Yedea, Eza Gdela Mizu. And you don't know which one is greater than the other one. What's the meaning of this Medrash? That this one says Chukas HaPesach, this one says Chukas HaTera. We don't know which one is greater, because there's a greatness in Avodas HaTzadikim that's not found in Avodas HaTshuva, and there's a greatness in Avodas HaTshuva that's not found in Avodas HaTzadikim. The greatness in Avodas HaTzadikim is in the Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla, the Ur that's being drawn down, because the Tzaddik is on a much more elevated spiritual level, so therefore the Ur that he's bringing down is much greater. Whereas the Avodas HaTshuva, the advantage over there is in the Avodah Shemitzad Hamata, the work that has to be done in the person below, because the person has to make a change. And the Rebbe mentions the conclusion of the Medrash that avodas tshuva is greater is because also tzaddikim have to do tshuva in a form of tshuva that's for them. And so since also the tzaddikim need to come to tshuva, therefore the avodas tshuva is greater, and the para aduma is greater than the carbon pesach. And now it's understood why the Akamas HaMishkan on the 1st of Nisan was before the Sreifas HaPara, which was on the 2nd day of Nisan. Because number one, it's understood that Avodas HaTzadikim comes before Avodas HaTshuva, even technically. First, a person has to go on the path of a tzaddik, and it's only if Chas V'Shalom, a person does an avera, that he then goes on the path of a Baal Tshuva. And number two, the greatness in Avodah Shemitzad Hamata, which is the Avodas HaTshuva, that because of it, Parshas Para comes before Parshas HaChodesh, is that it generates a greater Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla. What's great about the Avodas HaTshuva? That there's Avodah Shemitzad Hamata. What makes that great? That it generates a greater Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla. There's a certain greater that it brings down. And so that's why the Akamas HaMishkan was before the Sreifas HaPara, because the whole idea of Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla is connected to Parshas HaChodesh. And so the very first time, the Akamas HaMishkan has to be first, because the Akamas HaMishkan, or Parshas HaChodesh, is connected to Avodas HaTzadikim, and Avodas HaTzadikim technically and structurally has to come before Avodas HaTshuva, and also because the whole advantage of Avodas HaTshuva, that it's Avodah Shemitzad Hamata, is that as a result there is a greater Hamshacha Sa'er because of it. And so therefore the idea of Avodas HaTzadikim, which is Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla, has to come first, because only once you have that is there then place for the greatness that exists in Avodas HaTshuva, that because it's Avodah Shemitzad Hamata, it has its own special Hamshachas HaEr that the Avodas HaTzadikim doesn't have. And this is why the Yerushalmi says that Bedin hu shetaktam HaChodesh l'Para. Really, we should read Parshas HaChodesh before Parshas Para. What it's saying is that also now it fits to say Parshas HaChodesh before Parshas Para, because the whole greatness of Parshas Para, which is the Avodah Shemitzad Hamata, comes through Parshas HaChodesh, which is the Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla. Without first having the Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla, then there's no purpose, there's no benefit, there's no value to Avodah Shemitzad Hamata. It's only once there is Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla that then we can say that there's an advantage and a greatness to the Avodah Shemitzad Hamata because of the Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla that it draws down. However, this is only Bedin. Bedin, even today we should have a Chodesh before a Para. But it's only Bedin. The reason it's only Bedin is because once there already is the Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla through Parshas HaChodesh and the Akamas HaMishkan on the 1st of Nisan in the Midbar, so once they already had the Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla, it entered the world in a permanent way in the building of the Mishkan on the Shemini Lamaluyim, so already exists in the world. We already have in the world this Hamshachas HaEr Shalamayla. And so now we could have Parshas Para come before the reading of Parshas HaChodesh. And so over here now we basically, after explaining on the whole side structure about the Shmini Lamiloyim and the Shivas Miloyim. Now we explained over here all about Parshas HaChodesh and Parshas Parah, how they are the Avodas HaTzadikim and the Avodas HaTshuva. And this all leads us to answer our original question, or the original thing that we set out in the Sikha to explain. According to this, it comes out that the difference between Parshas Parah and Parshas HaChodesh is similar to the difference between the Shivas Miloyim and the Shmini Miloyim. And the similarity is in two things. Number one, we explained earlier that the greatness in the Akamas HaMishkan, in the Shivas Miloyim, is in the Kamos, in the quantity, and the greatness in the Akamas HaMishkan, in the Shmini Miloyim, is in the Eichos, in the quality, which is similar to the difference between Parshas Parah, which is Avodah Shemitzad HaMata, which is similar to the greatness of Kamos, because when you have Avodah Shemitzad HaMata, you're dealing with the Kamos of this world that you're engaging with, because the person is down here in Avodah HaTshuva, dealing with the world in a very real way, and the world is a place of Kamos. So that corresponds to the Shivas Miloyim and Parshas HaChodesh, which is the Amshachas Ur Shalamayla, which is similar to the greatness of Eichos. When we're talking about Ur and just Ruchnius and Elokus, there we have the element of Eichos. And number two, according to Rashi, that the Akamas HaMishkan in the Shivas Miloyim is learned from the command of the Chinuch of Aaron and his sons, unlike the Akamas HaMishkan in the Shmini Miloyim. When there was V'shachante B'Seichem, it was a command from Hashem, and as a result, there was V'shachante B'Seichem. And this is even though the Shivas Miloyim has an advantage that it was put up many more times. Even Rashi has that advantage in the Shivas Miloyim, and it also has a special chavivus since it wasn't said clearly, and anything that wasn't said clearly and is learnt out has a special chavivus, like the Gemara mentions a number of times. But still, it's understood that you can't compare the Shivas Miloyim to the Shmini Miloyim, because in the Shmini Miloyim you have a command from Hashem, and as a result you have a Shachante B'Seichem. You have the Amshachas Ur Shalamayla, which is similar to Parshas Parah and Parshas HaChodesh. That the greatness of Parshas Parah only comes after we have the greatness of Parshas HaChodesh. So you have the same idea that you can't compare Parshas Parah to Parshas HaChodesh, because in Parshas HaChodesh you have the Amshachas Ur Shalamayla, which that's the basis of the greatness of anything else, and that's also expressed in Shmini Miloyim, where you had the Amshachas Ur Shalamayla of V'shachante B'Seichem, because that's when the command to build the Mishkan was given, and that's why it was that building of the Mishkan that made and brought about the V'shachante B'Seichem.